Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Sunday, February 4th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game in 209 days, the game against Michigan in 300 days. And with that game exactly 300 days away, felt like today would be an appropriate day to take a look at the last few weeks, last almost month for the Michigan football team, because it has been an eventful period. We did a show a couple weeks ago with Tony Gerdeman, doing kind of a day-by-day look at all the stuff that had happened for Ohio State, and it was a lot. Michigan has had a similarly eventful month, not necessarily in the same direction as a lot of the news that Ohio State has had, but eventful nonetheless. So we're going to bring in Tony. Once again, Tony, let's just start. We're going to start this on January 8th. We started the Ohio State timeline on the day of the Cotton Bowl. So we're going to start this on January 8th. January 8th, Michigan wins the national championship. And then, January 11th, Zach Zinter goes to the NFL. January 11th, Junior Colson goes to the NFL. January 12th, Chris Jenkins goes to the NFL. And wrapping up that week, January 12th, a Michigan writer quoting a source, quote, "If you want to know what Jim thinks, just listen." Citing the terms, Jim Harbaugh has said he'll stay at Michigan, quote, "as long as they'll have me," close quote. "It seems the rest is up to Michigan." Tony, yeah, you had a couple guys go to the NFL, but it seems like, boy, you won the national championship. Your coach really wants to stay. Everything's turned up. Everything's going Millhouse's way. Everything's coming up Millhouse. There we go. I got there eventually.
Yeah, that's the way it sure seemed. If only you just looked at a slice of the calendar and didn't look at anything preceding it or going after it or believing that Jim Harbaugh was looking for an NFL job as he had done the prior 2 years. So yeah, I saw that quote. If you want to know what Jim thinks, just listen. If you want to know what Jim thinks, just watch him interview for an NFL job every year. That's what Jim thinks. That's what he wanted. And yeah, and boy, there are some truthers on board that he was going to be there. He's going to stick around. So please tell me more.
All right. Well, let's start with January 13th, National Championship Parade in Ann Arbor. Michigan President Santa Ono was not part of the parade. That was a little interesting. Then followed by a rally in the Chrysler Center, where Ward Manuel says to the adoring, cheering crowd regarding Jim Harbaugh, quote, "I am working on getting this man a new contract. I promise you," close quote. Tony, what could possibly go wrong? On January 13th, Braden McGregor declares for the NFL draft. Now, this is a compressed timeline for Michigan players because the NFL draft declaration deadline was on January 15th. So they had a lot less time than a lot of other places. So we've got some NFL draft decisions coming, Tony. January 14th, Blake Corum to the NFL draft. January 14th, Josh Wallace to the NFL draft. January 14th, J.J. McCarthy to the NFL draft. January 14th, Michael Barrett to the NFL draft. January 14th, Trevor Keegan to the NFL draft. January 14th, Herman Green to the NFL draft. January 14th, Drake Nugent to the NFL draft. January 14th, Roman Wilson to the NFL draft. That was all one day. January 15th, Josiah Stewart returning. January 15th, Donovan Edwards also announces he's returning. January 15th, Rod Moore announces he is returning. January 15th, Trenton Jones to the NFL draft. January 15th, Cornelius Johnson to the NFL draft. January 15th, Carson Barnhart to the NFL draft. January 15th, Makari Page returning. January 15th, A.J. Barner to the NFL draft. Those are all the ones that the Michigan account retweeted, so don't tell me, well, it didn't have a... these are all the people who felt compelled to tell you they were heading to the NFL draft and were retweeted by Michigan, so don't argue with me on who I included there and didn't include. January 15th, tweet, quote, "The Harbaugh-Michigan negotiations are at an impasse, at least for now. It isn't money, plenty there, but the clauses, what should be covered by immunity, brackets, e.g., cheeseburgers, etc., close quote, and whatnot, therein lies the rub." Tony, the rub. January 16th, we learn more about the rub the next day with Dan Wetzel. Specifically, sources said Harbaugh is seeking language that would grant him immunity from termination from any finding or sanction that could arise from multiple current NCAA investigations into the football program. Harbaugh is also seeking a delay in the start date of the new contract to maintain a lower buyout than NFL teams would have to pay Michigan to hire him away. The buyout in his current contract dropped from $2.25 million to $1.5 million on January 11th. Michigan is seeking to have that increase to about $4 million in new deal. Harbaugh has sought to have the new deal not start until February 15th, thus maintaining the lower and more favorable buyout number until after the NFL hiring cycle has concluded. Tony, that wraps up this second week that we're talking about. I remember very clearly saying to you, I'm starting to suspect that he maybe is not quite as sure they were 100% innocent and nothing happened and everything was fine. And also maybe he may be a little bit more interested in heading to the NFL than you might be led to believe by I will stay as long as they will have me.
Everything you read there is a span of 4 days, which is crazy when you have like a dozen players leaving. And just first off, not everybody should be leaving for the NFL. There are players here who are not going to be drafted. There are players here who could help their draft stock had they come back or gone somewhere else. You've got a lot of people leaving or several people leaving who really could have stood to play some more college football. But the impasse and the rub, that wasn't a rub, it's a full body massage that they're looking for in terms of like, I want this and I want this and I want this and my shoulders hurt. And if I could get a hot towel as well. Also, I would please like you to hold off on this buyout thing. Let's make the buyout lower. No reason. No reason. We just don't want that buyout to get too expensive for no reason. And then also just give me some time. And the whole thing that of wanting time and wanting the buyout, and it's not about the money. It's about Jim Harbaugh wanting to go back to the NFL and using whatever he can to just throughout this whole thing make himself not look like he's trying to leave. I thought he did a very good job of trying to convince people that he wanted to stay, especially Michigan fans and some members of the Michigan media as well, in terms of, well, he's saying he wants to stay. He's just looking for, the right verbiage on a contract, which we will get to here in a bit as well. But everything he did was calculated, in my opinion, in terms of, I don't want to look like the bad guy, but I'm definitely out of here.
And I missed one in there, January 15th. That was the date of his first interview with the Chargers, which was the same date of the Ohio Michigan negotiations, or it had had an impasse, at least for now. Tony, what does foreshadowing mean? Anyway, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about January 22nd, when Jim Harbaugh is expected to meet with the Chargers for a second time, per Adam Schefter. January 23rd, Mike Garofalo reports Harbaugh and the Chargers are in, quote, striking distance of a deal. I feel like we've done shows on a couple of these things in more details. January 24th. Here is a report from a Michigan reporter. Harbaugh's attorneys, who had been trying to work with Michigan to keep him in Ann Arbor, said, however, it took until the proverbial 11th hour on Wednesday for Michigan to give in on certain language. By then, it was too late. That is a report that came out from Angelique Chingelis from the Detroit News, giving a little bit more of the context behind the other story that broke on January 24th. Jim Harbaugh leaving for the Chargers. Tony, Ward Manuel's statement in part reads, quote, "We have been discussing a new contract that would make Jim the highest paid coach in college football. In the end, he wanted to explore and ultimately decided to pursue a return to coaching in the NFL." The statement continues, "Jim has always been extremely upfront with his communication regarding NFL opportunities and has been helpful with his transition and leadership. We had a great conversation tonight when he informed me of this decision to return to the NFL and offered his assistance in helping identify the needs for the program moving forward. We are working quickly to hire the next head coach for the program and will do everything possible to keep this current staff and team together." Speaking of foreshadowing, statement from Michigan President Santa Ono, same day, "We have been in talks with Jim Harbaugh for the last several weeks and have tried our best to retain him as our football coach. Jim called me today and let me know he has made the difficult decision to leave Michigan and join the Los Angeles Chargers in pursuit of his NFL dreams. For the fans, the players, and me personally, we are sad to hear of Jim's departure." January 26th, 2 days later, Sherrone Moore named head coach. Ben Herbert, strength coach, is at the press conference. January 27th, multiple reports that defensive coordinator Jesse Minter will follow Harbaugh to the Chargers. January 29th, Ben Herbert, who was at the Sherrone Moore press conference 3 days earlier, leaves Michigan for the Chargers. Justin Tress promoted to replace Ben Herbert. February 2nd, Michigan head QB coach Kirk Campbell is expected to get promoted to become the Wolverines' new offensive coordinator. Per a tweet from Bruce Feldman, the 37-year-old is very well regarded inside the program by players and staff. He's been the offensive coordinator at Old Dominion for 2 years before coming to Michigan. I think the thing, Tony, that jumps out to me, two things. One, boy, everyone wants to tell you how much they wanted to keep Jim Harbaugh there. And two, they wanted to really keep the staff and the team as together as possible. And so far, the players haven't left in the portal, but a bunch of the coaches have are seemingly in the portal or on their way to the portal to portal their way to the NFL.
Got to live out the dream. Got to go chase the Super Bowl, which I've said many times. I don't blame any college football coach for heading to the NFL because of the way college football has, or what it has become. But obviously, plenty of extenuating circumstances going on around here. I did chuckle at the Ward Manuel thing, saying Jim Harbaugh has always been upfront about his pursuit of the NFL, including last year when he said he was never going to pursue the NFL again. Very upfront right there in terms of the honesty there. Just the whole back and forth of the 11th hour trying to remove some of the immunity clause, because it's like, okay, we won't fire you for this, but we kind of fire you for this. And you get the contract, the wording a little bit changed, but really the thought is, like, if you've done something wrong, there's got to be punishment. And of course, Jim Harbaugh didn't want anything to do with that for whatever reason. Who knows why? But it was just this whole thing. I was thinking about this the other day. It's like Jim Harbaugh and his attorneys were just fake throwing tennis balls, and Michigan and the administration was the dog running for the tennis ball while they're holding the tennis ball the entire time. They're just trying to keep them busy while they talk with the NFL and try to make themselves look like, hey, yeah, we are definitely still interested. And, just, we got to get through these impasses. We've got to get through this. We'll get through there together. We obviously want to be here. It's a very tough decision. And I don't doubt that it was a tough decision, but it was always going to be the decision. As long as there was a team that would take him, he was going to go. And it's something he's been trying to do now. This was the third year. He finally got it done. And so I think any surprise or any disappointment, like, you all should have known, that everybody should have known that he was trying to get out and would eventually leave. And I think the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing Michigan fans that Ward Manuel botched this entire thing, because I don't care who the athletic director was. It could have been Bo Schembechler. Jim Harbaugh wasn't going to stay if the right NFL team came calling.
Well, I mean, if it was Bo Schembechler, you think about what he did with Bill Frieder as a basketball coach when Bo was the AD there, and you wonder how long Jim Harbaugh would have been the head coach at Michigan after the dalliance with the Vikings last year. That seemed like he was pretty much sure he had one foot out the door and then suddenly didn't. So I think the interesting thing here, Tony, is, first of all, the juxtaposition of the last month for Ohio State and Michigan, because Michigan was at the highest of highs and Ohio State was at the lowest of lows, at least by the Ohio State standards. And the lines at some point feel like they've kind of crossed over the last month as Ohio State has trended upwards and Michigan has, all of the guys who are coming back for unfinished business for Ohio State, the business is finished as far as a lot of those Michigan guys are concerned. So you've kind of crossed there. The other piece of this that's kind of, you notice, we talked all about the transfer portal in Ohio State, and we talked all about, guys coming back and, all recruiting commitments and all that kind of stuff. We didn't talk about a bunch of that stuff. Like, Michigan has not brought in people in the transfer portal. They don't have their Caleb Downs. They don't have their Will Howard. They don't have their Julian Sayin, whoever. That has just kind of not been a part of their story this month. That's the kind of thing where, yeah, you're going to have a dip after a season where you do something you haven't done in, 75 years or whatever it was. Sure, understandable. But there's also not the reloading that you necessarily would expect. You didn't get the bounce after the national championship that you would expect in terms of bringing in a bunch of guys either.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking of Ohio State in 2015. After they had won a national championship, they brought a bunch of people back because a lot of those guys were second-year players that were helping win that national championship. And they came back kind of satisfied. And so I don't think you're going to run into that situation with Michigan in 2024. Like, the number of guys who are returning, only a small portion of them had something to do, really involved with winning a national championship. So I wouldn't expect any type of, fat and happy type of thing. But there's been no capitalization on the national championship. There's been no capitalization yet on all of the different areas where there's a hole in the depth chart and you can come in there and play. So that needs to happen. I do wonder how much the just the unknown is playing into this in terms of the NCAA and how much of the negative recruiting in the portal or wherever is going on. But also you're hearing complaining from the Michigan side of things that the NIL isn't doing their job in all of this. They aren't as forceful or aren't as available as some other schools. And so, if you're not going to wade into that pool as deep as others have, then maybe this is going to be the kind of off season you always have. But I just think whenever you're changing a coach, it's hard to gain ground from that. I mean, just look at Alabama, what's going on there, look what's going on at Washington. It takes time to stop the slide and then begin the gradual climb up. So, Michigan has some time. They are returning a pretty decent defense, and I would expect them to be very busy in the spring in terms of the portal, wouldn't you?
I would think so, because you're losing so many guys and so many veteran guys, and you're not going to have an immediate fix for all of those. And they did not, they have not brought in a huge recruiting class where they've got, 30 guys in the 2024 recruiting class or anything like that. They also have currently 3 guys committed for the 2025 class. None of them ranked in the national rankings, and according to the 247 composite. And they have 2 guys who've come in the transfer portal, both of whom were committed back in December, an offensive lineman from Northwestern and a linebacker from Maryland, and that's it. So yeah, there has got to be a restocking of the cupboard at some point. And I think they've just sort of been in limbo for the last 3 weeks or so, thanks to the Jim Harbaugh, will he or won't he? And obviously they had a plan B, but everything just sort of, the machinery just sort of grinds to a halt when your head coach is maybe going to be there, maybe not, and maybe going to take your defensive coordinator and your strength coach. And, his son, Jay Harbaugh, has obviously been strongly reported. I don't think he's actually officially left, but he's been strongly linked to a Los Angeles Chargers job. So, there are just, it feels like they have just gone to just a screeching halt from what was one of the absolute high points in program history. And it's shocking how quickly it's happened.
Yeah. And the momentum is going the wrong way. And now you're asking a first time head coach to stop it. An athletic department that seems to be in a flux right now is maybe grasping at straws as well in terms of control, popularity, footing. And so it's not a great time to be a defending national champion right now. And just we've seen before, like sometimes you really capitalize on it the year after a national championship because recruiting takes a little bit of time. So I think it's not unheard of to see the struggles like this. Now, this is a lot because we also knew Michigan was going to lose 20 some players to graduation and early departures, and even more than that. But you really got to ramp it up in 2025. And I've said that I think Sherrone Moore could become a better recruiter than Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh, I think, settled a little bit and took some chances, and sometimes those hit and sometimes they didn't. And when they didn't, that's why we've talked about their lack of depth over the years. But, I think Sherrone Moore, you win a national championship, you should be able to capitalize on being a national program and recruit nationally and recruit well. And we'll see if he can do that and get them out of the little funk that they've got going on. Of course, if you just go ahead and go 10-2, 11-1 next year, I think that'll help an awful lot as well.
Sure. Yeah. If the sort of rebound year, the drop down year is 10-2 and you're the 10 seed in the playoffs, that's an acceptable step back year as long as 2025 goes back in the right direction. They are, just to put some numbers on this, 27 commitments for 2024, but even with all that, they are ranked number 16 in the 247 composite, number 19 in the overall rank, which factors in, I believe, the transfers as well. So, you're sort of restocking the cupboards, but it's not necessarily elite talent. One guy ranked in the top 100 nationally in that 2024 class. And, we'll see what the Sherrone Moore recruiting machine looks like. He's young, he's energetic. He, I think, is very popular with the players. So we'll see how that factors in. We'll see how the NCAA, whatever the NCAA tries to do, might factor in. We may have another Michigan timeline month coming up in a month or two, depending on what the NCAA decides to do and when they decide to do it. So just thought that was an interesting kind of look back, just to kind of give you a little perspective on where things are and where things have been the last couple of weeks, because there has just been a lot of news flying around both Ohio State and Michigan, for good and for bad. Anytime you start a month with winning a national championship, it can't be a bad month. But anytime you have the month that Ohio State has had since that Cotton Bowl, well, that's not exactly a bad month either. So should be a very interesting 300 days until Ohio State and Michigan get together once again on the football field. We can't wait. Always one of our favorite weeks of the year. Always one of our favorite rivalries to talk about and two teams to talk about, and we'll be talking about them all year long at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where Tony and Kevin and I cover the team. Mark covers recruiting. Got our whole team of X's and O's gurus making you a smarter football fan, plus a very active, lively, and very fun board at the Huddle Board, presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We hope to see you there. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.